Hello and welcome to BYJU'S IAS. Let's get started and look into our daily quiz. Let's look into the first question. With reference to National Pharmaceutical Pricing Authority, which of the following statements are correct? NPPA is an independent body of experts under the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. NPPA is required to monitor the prices of drugs, take corrective measures where warranted, and has the power to fix and regulate such prices. Which of the statements are correct? The answer to this is 2 only. Why have we taken this practice question? Because this article on the PIB makes a mention of NPPA. Now, if we look into the options, the first option says that it is an independent body of experts under the Ministry of Health. This happens to be a wrong statement. Why? Because it does not fall under the Ministry of Health, but instead it is the Ministry of Chemicals, which is why the first statement is wrong. When we look into the second statement, it is right as well. So what are the functions of NPPA? Let's say, for example, there is a manufacturer of drugs. If the drug cost is exorbitant in the market, who will regulate it? Who will speak to the manufacturer? Who will ensure that the prices of this particular drug is affordable to the people in the country? That happens to be NPPA. So if the prices of the drugs are comparatively costly in the market, speaking to the manufacturers, regulating it, setting a price so that it is affordable for the people in India happens to be the primary function of NPPA. So what are the functions of NPPA? It includes implementing and enforcing the provisions of Drugs Price Control Order in accordance with the powers delegated to it. It will undertake relevant studies in respect of pricing of drugs and formulations. It will monitor availability of the drugs, identify shortages, and also take remedial measures, which means if the number of medicines are not available in the market, it will speak to the manufacturer, will speak to the government and ensure corrective measures are taken so that it is present and is available to the people. To collect, maintain data on production, exports and imports, market share of individual companies, the profitability of the companies for the bulk drugs and formulations, to deal with legal matters arising out of decisions of the authority, to render advice to the central government on changes, revisions in the drug policy, and finally render assistance to the central government in parliamentary matters relating to the drug pricing. These are some of the functions of NPPA, but do remember it comes under the Ministry of Chemical and not under the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. Now let's look into the next practice question. Consider the following statements with respect to Jahanpanah city. It was the last medieval city of Delhi. It was built by Sultan Firuz Shah Tughlaq. Which of the above statements are incorrect? Since it is asking for the incorrect statement, the answer to this is both. Why have we taken this practice question? Because this article here makes a mention of Jahanpanah city. What is this Jahanpanah city? This happens to be the fourth medieval city of Delhi. Who was it established by? It was established by Muhammad bin Tughlaq of the Delhi Sultanate. So if you look into the option, it is not by Sultan Firuz Shah Tughlaq, but instead it is by Muhammad bin Tughlaq of the Delhi Sultanate. What is this city all about? Back during that period, there was an apprehension that the Mongols would conquer the Delhi. In order to protect Delhi, in order to fortify that particular region, a new city was created called as Jahanpanah. So what is Jahanpanah? This happens to be the refugee of the world. Added to this, during this period, the Sultan Muhammad bin Tughlaq also shifted the capital from Delhi to Daulatabad in Deccan. But this was a temporary provision, and after a considerable period of time, since the city did not flourish in itself, he had to return back to Delhi as well. So kindly remember, Jahanpanah was the fourth medieval city of Delhi. It was established by Muhammad bin Tughlaq of the Delhi Sultanate. Now let's look into the next practice question. With respect to Rabindranath Tagore, which of the following statements are correct? Tagore renounced his knighthood in protest of the Bengal famine. He became the first non-European to win the Nobel Prize for Literature. The national anthem for Bangladesh was composed by Tagore. Which of the statements are correct? The answer to this is 2 and 3 only. Why have we taken this practice question? Because this article here makes a mention of Rabindranath Tagore. So what are the facts that we have to know which is important from the preliminary examination point of view? He became the first non-European to win the Nobel Prize for Literature. He was the first non-white person to win a Nobel Prize, and he was also given a knighthood as well, but this was returned not during the Bengal famine but because it was a protest against the Jallianwala Bagh massacre which had taken place during the British period. Further, we all know that Rabindranath Tagore ji had a lot of accomplishments when it comes to the contribution of literature. So the national anthems of both India and Bangladesh were composed by Tagore. The Sri Lankan national anthem was also inspired by him, and Tagore ji happened to compose Amar Songla Bangla in 1905 in the wake of Bengal partition to foster a spirit of unity and patriotism among the Bengalis. So if you look into this question, the first option seems to be wrong because it was not during the Bengal famine but during the Jallianwala Bagh massacre. The other two options are right, so it would be 2 and 3 only. Now let's look into the next practice question. Recently, the term prompt corrective action was seen in the news. What does it refer to? PCA is a framework under which banks with weak financial metrics are put under the watch of the RBI, a weather monitoring system developed by India Meteorological Department, a new strategy against Maoists, an initiative in the National Education Policy to revamp the elementary education. Which of the statements best describes about prompt corrective action? It is a framework under which banks with weak financial metrics are put under the watchful eyes of the Reserve Bank of India. So what would happen? Let's assume for a moment that there is a large scale non-performing assets. The banks are not performing as per the rules and guidelines given by the Reserve Bank of India. Let's assume for a moment that these banks may also fall in trouble as well. That is when the vigilant eyes of the Reserve Bank of India will look into this particular banking operations and will put into what is called as the prompt corrective action. The prompt corrective action for the first time was used in the year 2016 when the number of non-performing assets belonging to number of state-run banks were having non-performing assets which are much beyond the limits. So what would happen? The minute that bank is placed under this prompt corrective action, restrictions will be placed on this bank. They would not be allowed to set up new branches. They would not be allowed to pay dividends as well. They would not be able to give too much of lending to a particular sector, and other corrective measures like special audits, restructuring operations, superseding the bank board of directors, bringing in new management so that this whole structure is changed and new guidelines are given to this particular bank so that it does not face the stress of the banking sector. What are the type of restrictions in the prompt corrective action? There are two types of restrictions. One is what is called as the mandatory restriction. The other is what is called as the discretionary restriction. What is this mandatory restriction? These are the restrictions imposed on that bank which is put under the prompt corrective action. So the restrictions on dividend branch, extinctions, director compensation all falls under the mandatory restriction. Then we have the discretionary restriction, which means the restrictions on lending and deposit are under this particular category. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference in this article. Now let's look into the next practice question. With reference to dugong, a mammal found in India, which of the following statements are correct? It is a herbivorous marine animal. It is found along the entire coast of India. It is given legal protection under Schedule 1 of the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972. Select the correct answer using the code given below. The answer to this is 1 and 3 only. This happens to be a previous year question from the year 2015. If you look into the second option, this happens to be a wrong statement. Why? Because it is found near the pockets of Tamil Nadu at the southern part of India, not along the entire coast of India, which is why the second option given here is wrong. Now let's look into the fact of the day. The fact of the day for today's discussion is Vayo Naman. What is Vayo Naman? This is in reference to the senior citizens in the country. So as a measure of respecting them, thanking them and making sure that the future life is also comfortable, we have the Ministry of Social Justice which has taken up this initiative of thanking them on the occasion of International Day of Older Persons on 1st October. So what is Vayo Naman here? It is about thanking them for all that they have done and making sure that there are measures that are taken up by the government of India in order to make their life happy in the near future. So we have the International Day of Older Persons, which is conducted every year on the 1st of October by the Ministry of Social Justice. During this particular announcement, we also have the Ministry of Social Justice, which is planning to release one of the portals. What is this portal called? This portal is called as Sacred. What does Sacred stands for? It stands for Senior Able Citizens for Re-employment in Dignity. So what is it speaking about? It is speaking about re-employment. So any individual, a senior citizen who is above 60 years of age, who has aspirations to work, then a portal will be created such that the industrial body and the senior citizens would be able to interact on this portal. So what is happening here? On one side, there is development of job. On the other side, there is also a portal created so that the industry can interact with the senior citizens. In order to make sure that there are opportunities provided to the elderly, the ministry has written to multiple associations like the Confederation of the Indian Industries, Federation of the Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry, and the Association of Associated Chambers of Commerce and Industry of India. Why? So that they could increase the employment opportunities for the elders. So all those people who are above 60 years of age will be able to register on this portal. They would be able to register giving the credentials like the education, the experience, the past history of work and the areas of interest, and recruiters, the industries, would also be able to post the jobs that they require, and if their education, their skill set is able to manage for those people who are in that particular domain, they would be provided the job opportunities. But do remember, this is not a job employment guarantee program, but it will provide a platform where the elderly can interact with the industrial body. It is this that we have to understand in reference to this article. So this is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.